Legislative session, we want to get your thoughts on a big issue that's been on the campaign trail and in your state, criminal justice reform. We've seen blue and red states' governor dial back the war on drugs. You've been pushing legislation to remove some of the rigid and harsh sentences that have increased the prison population. We're going to put up a couple of those. You've got a proposal to treat nonviolent drug offenses as misdemeanors and end automatic mandatory minimum sentences for certain drug possession. And you say this improves on the state laws that are on the books there in your state, which currently require a 2-year jail sentence for simple drug possession in certain areas. Why do you think this approach is better for public safety?
Well, let's start with the economics. It costs us $120 a day to keep somebody in prison. We have about 500 people in prison today simply for possession, not for sale, not for dealing or giving away, simply because they had it on their person or in their car. At $120 a day, it gets pretty darn expensive. And by the way, if they're a young person, a juvenile, that cost can skyrocket to $300,000 for a year of incarceration. So, number one, let's be practical. Number two, think of all the lives that are changed because we're pursuing that treatment. One of the things I say is, let's stop giving advanced degrees in being a criminal by sending people to jail when they're not really criminals. And so I think that that's very important. And then there's another part of this, quite frankly, and that is that these laws have a disproportionate impact on black and brown people. They're written in such ways to be about urban environments and urban zones where people are densely populated. Well, listen, when you're going to write laws that way, you have to look at how they're having a disparate effect on people based on their race as well as where they live.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that there is a disparate impact on black and brown people because of these laws and because of the patterns and practices of police throughout the country. Some statistics that you surely know: 1 in 3 black men are likely to go to prison at some point in their lives, despite black and white people using and selling drugs at similar rates. Black and brown people comprise 60% of those who are in state prisons for drug offenses. During traffic stops, people of color 3 times more likely to be searched. This all contributes to the 1.5 million men who are missing from society, either dead or in prison. Many of those folks are in Connecticut. How much do you think your state has lost because of the disparate treatment of the black and brown people who live in Connecticut?
I think it has, the impact per year in lost productivity is in the hundreds of millions of dollars. You get a felony conviction and you end up in prison for 2 years for simple possession. Your life's not over, but your life is adversely impacted for the rest of your life. Your earnings are adversely impacted, on top of the costs that we have to shell out to keep you housed for that period of time. I'm really concerned about the disparate impact with respect to young black people ending up with criminal records, where a similar situated kid, but in a different community, because he's in part taking into consideration his white race, is not going to end up in that same situation. That has lifelong consequences, and I think as a society we have to deal with those and really have to say, do we really want people in prison because they simply possess drugs?
Right.
I'm not talking about sale. We're not changing anything with respect to sale. What I'm saying is we are wrecking people's lives, but we're also wrecking our economy and having adverse impact on our ability to fund things like education. Shouldn't we be funding education and funding drug treatment and alcohol treatment? Wouldn't that be a better way to spend our money?
Governor, as you know...
And let me say one thing. I'm a former prosecutor. I mean, I tried 23 felony cases. I had convictions in 22 of those cases. I tried 4 homicides as a prosecutor and also tried homicides as a defense attorney. I'm pretty tough on crime, but I'm also pretty tough on how we spend our money and the bad investments that we've been making for a better part of 2 generations.
Yeah, I want to ask about that because, as you know, conservatives are saying this bill is actually too soft on crime. So even if there are a lot of good ideas in this bill, which I believe there are, fair to say conservatives do have a point when they err on the side of keeping criminals off the streets?
Sure, we should keep criminals off the streets, absolutely. But should we do it in such a way that has a disparate impact on black and Hispanic people? Should we fail to recognize that that's the case? Should we fail to recognize that these laws are, in fact, written in such a way that they actually further burden people in urban environments than they do in non-urban environments? Should we close our eyes to the reality of that? I don't think we should. And I think we need to, again, I'll go back to this, we need to examine how we spend our money and what the long-term implications on lives, not lost to death so much as lost to earning capacity and the ability to get a college education or finish your high school or get a student loan or have a decent place to live. Those added, making those things impossible to do has this unbelievably disparate impact on people of color, but also really does great damage to our economy. If you think about some of your urban environments in this country, think about trying to bring them back when a large percentage of people have criminal records where they wouldn't have criminal records if they lived someplace else in your state.
Right, and that, as you've been arguing, seems unfair no matter how it was originally written. Governor Dannel P, thanks for spending time with us today.
Thank you.
Up next, the president of FIFA breaks